believing that the great temples of commerce are built on nothing more than steel and ambition is the most dangerous assumption one can make. You walk through aisles illuminated by a false sun, your reflection captured in 100 polished surfaces, never once considering the ground beneath your feet or the history soaked into the very walls that surround you. They call these places Liverpool, a name that echoes with voyages and new worlds. But I have seen the truth in the cracked mirrors of their dressing rooms. I have heard the whispers carried on the sterile, recycled air. These are not mere stores. They are mausoleums of want, cathedrals of quiet desperation, and some of the souls who shopped here never truly left. The stories they tell are not for entertainment. They are scars on the memory of the living. They will tell you the foundation is concrete, poured deep to support the weight of 1,000 dreams and 1,000,000 transactions. But the whispers I have heard speak of something older. Before the polished marble and the silent escalators, there was earth, and that earth held memories. In one location, they dug deep and unearthed a collection of shattered pottery and strange discolored stones, arranged in a pattern that made the surveyors uneasy. They called it an archaeological anomaly, filed a report, and then covered it with a layer of impenetrable cement. They buried the past, believing it would stay dead. But energy does not die. It seeps, it rises, it stains the new world above with the sorrows of the old, a slow, dark bleeding that no amount of bleach or bright lighting can ever wash away. Imagine a man, his name lost to time like a smudged signature on a forgotten receipt, tasked with guarding this silent kingdom at night. He walks the same path every hour, the click of his heels a lonely metronome in the vast emptiness. For weeks, his only companions are the plastic people, frozen in poses of perpetual desire. But then, a change, a subtle tilting of a head in the menswear department. He dismisses it, a trick of the light, a symptom of fatigue. The next night, a hand on a mannequin that was resting on its hip is now outstretched, fingers seeming to beckon him closer. The cold dread begins to crawl up his spine, for he knows he is not alone. He is the guardian of a silent, waking army. He began to document it, a madman's journal written on the back of incident reports. He wrote of the bridal mannequin, her veil ever so slightly askew each morning, as if she had been weeping through the night. He described the children mannequins, how they would appear in a different formation, gathered in a small circle, as if sharing a secret only the soulless can know. The most terrible entry spoke of a night when he rounded a corner and saw them all, dozens of them from every department, turned to face the main entrance, not in their designated places, but gathered like a congregation, waiting for a door to open that he could not see. He felt their collective, empty gaze upon him, and understood he was not the guard. He was the exhibit. This guard story ends, as you might expect. He was found one morning in the security office, the monitors showing nothing but static, his face a mask of primal terror, his heart simply having given up the fight. The official report said it was an aneurysm, a tragic but natural event. But those who cleaned out his locker found his frantic notes, his sketches of the changed positions, the pleas for someone to believe him. They were dismissed as the ramblings of a disturbed mind. Listen carefully, because this is crucial. The store did not want a haunting, it wanted sales. So the truth, like the strange stones in the foundation, was buried deep, and a new braver guard was hired to walk the lonely halls, unaware that he was walking among the dead who had learned to wear the faces of the living. Now, let us descend into the belly of the beast. The stockrooms, far from the curated perfection of the sales floor, These are labyrinths of cardboard and steel, where the air is thick with the dust of forgotten merchandise. Here, another story was born, whispered between the workers who moved the heavy pallets and scanned the endless barcodes. It was the story of a giggle, a child's laugh, echoing in the cavernous silence when the loading bay doors were sealed shut for the night. A young man named Carlos was the first to hear it clearly. He was working late, cataloging a new shipment of toys, when the sound, light and joyful, trickled down from the higher shelves. It was impossible. The store was empty. The doors were locked. The nearest child was miles away, asleep in their bed. Carlos tried to rationalize it. He thought it was the wind whistling through a vent or the building settling, but the sound came again, closer this time, followed by the soft, unmistakable patter of small running feet on the concrete floor just beyond the next aisle. He called out, his voice trembling, expecting a co-worker playing a prank. The only reply was silence. A silence that was suddenly heavier, colder, and more oppressive than before. He felt a sudden, intense cold spot move past him, raising the hair on his arms. He abandoned his scanner and fled, not stopping until he was back under the fluorescent safety of the main floor. He never worked a late shift in the warehouse again, but the story spread, a contagion of fear. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Others began to share their own experiences from the tomb of forgotten products. A woman swore she saw a small red ball bounce once across a walkway and then vanish before it hit the ground. Another worker, while organizing boxes of shoes, found a small antique-looking doll sitting atop a stack, a doll that did not belong to any inventory, past or present. Its porcelain face was cracked, and its button eyes seemed to follow him as he worked. He placed it in the bin for damaged goods, but the next day it was back, sitting on the exact same stack of boxes, its head tilted at a slightly different angle. It was a message, a claim, a silent declaration that this space, this cold and lonely kingdom of boxes, belonged to someone else now. The whispers eventually formed a coherent tale, pieced together from fragments of fear and shared glances. The child, they said, was the spirit of a little girl who had wandered away from her mother during a busy holiday sale decades ago. She had slipped into the employee-only section, seeking a place to play hide-and-seek, and found herself in the vast, confusing maze of the stockroom. A tragic accident, a fall from a high shelf, and her game became eternal. She was never found until it was too late. Now her spirit remains, forever playing in the shadows, her laughter a chilling elegy, a reminder that even in these temples of commerce, innocence can be lost and never recovered. The red ball was hers, the doll, her only friend. Let us now ascend from the darkness of the warehouse and move toward the light, or what passes for it, the bridal department, a realm of white lace, shimmering silk, and promises of eternal happiness. Here the air should be filled with hope, but in one particular store, it was choked with a deep and abiding sorrow. The centerpiece of the collection was a magnificent gown displayed on a special mannequin they called Isabella. She was beautiful, her painted face serene, her posture elegant. The dress was a masterpiece, but every morning, the junior staff would arrive to find the pristine white hem of the dress marked with a faint grayish smudge, like dried mud or cold ashes. At first, they blamed the night cleaners. The head of the department, a stern woman named Eleanor, ordered the dress to be cleaned meticulously each evening and covered with a heavy plastic sheet. But the next morning, the smudge would be there again, sometimes darker, sometimes shaped almost like a weeping trail. It was inexplicable. Security cameras were reviewed, revealing nothing. The night watchman saw no one enter the department. The cleaners swore they never touched the gown. The mystery deepened, casting a pall over the entire floor. The dress, once a symbol of joy, began to feel like a shroud. Prospective brides, who tried it on, would often complain of a sudden, overwhelming feeling of sadness, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The story was eventually unearthed by a curious archivist in the local library, a young woman who had heard the rumors from a friend who worked at the store. She searched through old newspapers from the year the store was built. There, she found it. A small article about a young bride-to-be, Eliza, who had bought her wedding dress from the very same plot of land where a smaller, independent boutique once stood. Days before her wedding, her fiancé was killed in a terrible carriage accident. Eliza, consumed by a grief so profound it shattered her mind, was said to have walked into the nearby river wearing her wedding gown. Her body was recovered, the hem of her beautiful dress stained with the river's mud and silt. The boutique was torn down. The grand department store rose in its place, but Eliza's spirit, forever bound to her symbol of lost hope, remained. The smudges were not dirt. They were her tears, her memory, her eternal protest against a happiness she could never have. The mannequin, Isabella, was merely a vessel for her heartbreak. Eleanor, upon hearing the story, felt a chill that was all too familiar. And this is where everything changes for you. They moved the dress to the archives, but they say that on certain nights, when the moon is full, a faint weeping can be heard from the bridal department, and the scent of river water and damp earth hangs heavy in the air. The store had built over her sorrow, but it could never truly pave it over. From the silent sorrow of the bride, we move to the cold, mechanical heart of the building, the elevator, the simple box of steel and wires designed for vertical transit. Yet, in this place, it was known by the employees as the Ferryman. It had a mind of its own. It would often refuse to move, its doors staying open on an empty floor for long, unnerving minutes. Other times, it would travel to floors that were not requested, the buttons lighting up with no human touch. But its most disturbing habit was its obsession with the children's department on the 4th floor. Late at night, long after the last customer had gone, security guards would watch on their monitors as the elevator would ascend on its own to the 4th floor. The doors would slide open, wait, and then close again, as if it had just dropped off an invisible passenger. One skeptical security manager decided to investigate this phenomenon himself. He was a man who believed in faulty wiring, not phantoms. He stayed late one Tuesday, a notoriously quiet night, and rode the elevator, testing every button, checking every sensor. Everything worked perfectly. Satisfied, he took the elevator down to the ground floor to head home. As the doors were closing, the button for the 4th floor lit up, bathing the small space in a cold, artificial light. The elevator began its slow, deliberate ascent. He had not touched the panel. He was utterly and completely alone. A cold sweat prickled his skin as the numbers above the door climbed. 2, 3. When the elevator reached the 4th floor, the bell chimed, a sound that suddenly seemed mocking and sinister. The doors slid open to reveal the children's department, shrouded in the dim glow of emergency lighting. The cheerful murals of cartoon animals on the walls now looked like grotesque caricatures in the shadows. The silence was absolute. He stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a presence, a weight in the air, the distinct sensation of being watched by 100 unseen eyes. Then from the far end of the department, near the toy section, he heard it, the slow creaking sound of a single rocking horse, beginning to move, back and forth, in the suffocating darkness. He slammed his hand on the door close button, his rational mind shattering into 1,000 pieces. The doors seemed to take an eternity to respond, but finally, they sealed him back inside the steel box. He rode it down to the basement, not the ground floor, and left through a service exit, never speaking of what he had seen to his superiors. He resigned the following week, citing personal reasons. The Ferryman, however, continued its nightly pilgrimage. It was a vessel, a transport for the lost children, the giggling ghost from the stockroom, and perhaps others. It was their private carriage, their link between the worlds, forever riding the lonely currents that flow through the haunted heart of the store. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Now, we turn our gaze to the surfaces that watch us back, the mirrors, the polished floors, the darkened glass of the storefronts. After closing, we believe these are simple reflections of our world. But what if they are more? What if they are windows, thin veils, separating our reality from another, a darker one that exists just on the other side? A young woman, a cleaner named Maria, learned this truth in the most terrifying way possible. Her job was to polish the endless marble floors of the cosmetics department each night, turning them into a vast, dark mirror. She found the work meditative, the rhythmic hum of the buffer, a comfort in the otherwise silent building, until the night she saw the man who wasn't there. She was working near the main fragrance counter, the machine's roar filling the empty space. When she glanced at the reflection in the floor ahead of her, she saw herself, she saw the buffer, and she saw a tall, thin man standing behind her. He was dressed in a dark, old-fashioned suit and was completely featureless, a silhouette of pure shadow with no discernible face. She whipped around, her heart leaping into her throat. There was no one there. The aisle was empty. Shaking, she convinced herself it was a trick of the light, a distortion caused by the curved glass of the perfume displays. She took a deep breath and went back to her work, deliberately avoiding looking at the reflections. But the feeling of being watched was now intense, a physical pressure on the back of her neck. She couldn't resist. She dared one more quick glance at the floor. He was there again, in the reflection, but he had moved. He was closer now, standing right behind her reflected self, one shadowy hand raised as if to rest on her shoulder. Maria screamed, dropping the handle of the buffer and scrambling backwards. The machine, no longer guided, spun out of control and crashed into a display of expensive crystal perfume bottles, shattering them. The sound was deafening in the silence, and the cloying scent of a dozen clashing fragrances filled the air like a funeral wreath. When security arrived, they found her huddled in a corner, sobbing, pointing at the floor, and babbling about the shadow man. They looked, of course. They saw only their own reflections, staring back from the now cracked and perfume-soaked marble. Maria was let go, deemed unstable, but her story became a legend among the cleaning crew. They called him the Store Walker, an entity that lived within the reflections. They said he was a collector of emotions, the greed, the envy, the loneliness that soaked into the very fabric of the building day after day. He was a tulpa, an entity born from the collective unconsciousness of 1,000 shoppers, and he could only be seen at the edge of sight, in the corner of your eye, in the dark mirror of a freshly polished floor. They learned to work without ever looking down. Let us drift now to another counter, one where scents are not a sign of danger, but of luxury and memory. The perfume department, a place of atomizers and delicate bottles, promising to evoke fields of flowers, distant shores, or a lover's embrace. But one counter, in a forgotten corner of the store, held a scent that was not for sale. It was the ghost of a fragrance, a perfume discontinued decades ago called Midnight Dahlia. It was a complex scent, heavy with florals, but with a dark, musky undertone. No one under the age of 60 would even remember it. Yet, late at night, long after the store had been sealed, employees would report smelling it. A distinct and powerful wave of midnight dahlia that would hang in the air for a moment and then vanish. The scent was always localized to the same spot, the small enclosed space of a single dressing room at the far end of the women's department. It was a room that was always colder than the others, a room where the light bulbs seemed to burn out with frustrating regularity. A new employee, unaware of the legend, once went into that specific room to change after her shift. As she closed the door, the scent hit her. It was overpowering, as if someone had just emptied an entire bottle. She choked, her eyes watering, and in the mirror, for a fleeting second, she swore she saw the reflection of a woman standing behind her, a woman with glamorous 1970s makeup and a cascade of dark hair, her eyes filled with a terrible sadness. The legend, when she dared to ask, was tied to a local socialite named Genevieve. She was a famous beauty, a wealthy patron of the arts, and a devoted customer of the store. Her signature scent was Midnight Dahlia. In the winter of 1978, she vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned in a nearby city, but Genevieve was never seen again. The police investigation went cold. The last person to report seeing her alive was a sales clerk at this very store, who said Genevieve had been trying on a new coat and seemed agitated, distracted. She had bought the coat and left. The dressing room, the one that now perpetually smells of her perfume, was the last one she ever used. Her spirit, it seems, is trapped in a loop, forever revisiting the last place she felt safe, the last moments before her life took its dark, unknown turn. The scent is her signature, her ethereal calling card. The brief vision in the mirror is a glimpse of her final moments, an emotional echo imprinted on the very space itself. The employees who know the story give that dressing room a wide berth. They understand that some doors are better left unopened, some mysteries better left unsolved. What the stars don't tell you openly is that memory is a force, and grief can be a ghost, tethering a soul to a place with a chain made of forgotten perfume. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? From these fragmented tales, these whispers from different departments, we now arrive at the heart of the matter. The story that binds all the others together. It comes not from a terrified young employee, but from a man who had become part of the store's very architecture. His name was Arthur, and he was the head janitor, a man who had worked within these walls for 50 years. He was retiring, and on his last night, he sat with the young security chief and unburdened his soul. He had seen everything: the mannequin's slow dance, the ghostly child's ball, the sorrowful stains on the wedding dress. He had seen it all and kept his silence because he knew the source. He knew the name of the original ghost. Arthur spoke in a low, raspy voice, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. He spoke of a man named William, one of the store's first managers back when it opened. William was a cruel man, obsessed with profit and perfection. He drove his employees to their breaking point, firing them for the smallest infractions. He was particularly cruel to a young stock boy named Thomas, a quiet, fragile boy who was the sole provider for his sick mother. William saw his desperation as a weakness to be exploited, working him to the bone for meager pay, piling on abuse and humiliation in front of the other staff. Thomas endured it all, silently, his shame and anger a poison slowly filling his soul. One evening, during the store's grand holiday celebration, William falsely accused Thomas of stealing from the cash register. He did it publicly, in front of a crowd of shoppers and staff. A final, brutal act of degradation. Thomas, his spirit finally broken, simply turned and walked away without a word. He climbed the stairs to the roof, and as the festive music played below, he leaped from the edge. His death was ruled a suicide, a tragedy quickly swept under the rug to avoid tarnishing the store's reputation. William faced no repercussions, but Thomas never left. His rage, his sorrow, his profound sense of injustice became the building's phantom limb. Arthur explained that all the other phenomena were just echoes, ripples from this central violent event. Thomas's spirit was not one single entity, but a fractured consciousness that infected the entire store. His childish innocence remained in the stockroom, where he once played hide-and-seek on his breaks. His broken heart attached itself to the bride's dress, a symbol of a happiness he would never know. His anger moved the mannequins, a silent, mocking army. His loneliness rode the elevator, forever seeking an escape he could not find. Thomas was the wellspring of all the fear that permeated the building. He was the wound that had never been allowed to heal. Arthur then made a confession that chilled the young security chief to the bone. For 50 years, Arthur had been trying to appease the spirit. He would leave a small piece of chocolate on the top shelf of the stockroom for the childlike part of Thomas. He would whisper words of comfort to the bridal gown when he passed it on his rounds. Before his shift, he would go to the roof and leave a single white flower on the spot where Thomas had jumped. These were not just superstitions. They were a pact, a way to manage the rage, to keep the darkness at bay. "He's not evil," Arthur whispered, his old eyes wet with tears. "He's just broken, and this place broke him. You have to remember him. If you forget him, the anger will consume this whole building." With that, Arthur turned in his keys and walked out of the store for the last time, leaving the young chief to grapple with the terrifying weight of his legacy. The store was not just a business, it was a tomb, and they were all its unwitting caretakers. The chief now understood the cold spots, the strange sounds, the pervasive feeling of being watched. It was the fractured soul of a forgotten boy, crying out for justice in the only way he knew how. The haunting was not a curse, it was a memory that had grown teeth. And now the responsibility of honoring that memory, of keeping the ghosts of the past from devouring the present, rested on his shoulders. But the story does not end within the store's walls. Listen carefully, because this is crucial. The energy that festers in such a place is not always content to stay contained. Sometimes it latches on, it follows you home. This is the final, and perhaps most disturbing, chapter of our tale. A customer, a woman named Clara, bought a beautiful antique music box from a special clearance event at the store. She was drawn to it, its polished wood and intricate carvings seeming to call to her from across the crowded room. She took it home, delighted with her find, and placed it on her bedside table. That night, she wound it up, and it played a gentle, tinkling lullaby that helped her drift off to sleep. She awoke at exactly 3 a.m. to the sound of the music box playing. She hadn't wound it again. It should have been silent. She reached over and shut the lid, her heart beating a little faster. The music stopped. She tried to tell herself it was just a mechanical quirk, an old spring releasing its tension. But the next night, the same thing happened. 3 a.m., the lullaby began to play on its own. This time, as she opened her eyes, she saw a small, shadowy figure standing in the corner of her bedroom, the silhouette of a young boy, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through her window. She squeezed her eyes shut, convinced she was dreaming, but when she opened them again, the figure was still there, silent and watchful. The occurrences escalated. She would hear faint whispers coming from the room where she kept the music box. Objects in her house would be moved, a book placed on the floor, a picture frame turned to face the wall. The final straw came when she came home from work to find a single muddy footprint on her clean kitchen floor, the print of a small bare foot. It was the footprint of a child, terrified. Clara packed the music box in a bag, drove it back to the store, and left it on the front steps before they opened, with a note that simply said, "He wants to go home." She had unwittingly purchased more than an antique. She had purchased an attachment. A piece of Thomas's fragmented soul had clung to the object and followed her. This final tale serves as the most potent warning. The things we acquire, the objects we bring into our homes, are not always inanimate. They can be vessels. They can carry with them the history, the energy, the sorrow of the places they have been. The great store on the hill is a reservoir of such energies, a library of human emotion. When you buy a piece of its history, you may be borrowing a ghost. You may be inviting a whisper into your own sacred space. So the next time you are drawn to a beautiful object in a place with a long history, pause for a moment. Ask yourself what you are truly buying. Is it just a thing of beauty, or is it a container for a story that is desperate to be told? The polished floors will continue to be buffed to a mirror shine, reflecting the endless parade of wants and desires. The mannequins will be dressed in the latest fashions, their plastic eyes staring out at a world they can never join. The elevators will continue their lonely journeys, carrying passengers both seen and unseen. The store lives on, a monument to commerce, its secrets buried deep within its concrete bones. But now you know what lies beneath the surface, what walks the aisles after the lights go out. The whispers are real, the shadows are watching, and the memory of a broken boy still echoes in the halls, a permanent stain on the bright, clean facade. Remember Arthur, the janitor, who knew the truth. He understood that these presences are not necessarily monsters to be vanquished. They are echoes of pain, trapped in a loop of their own tragedy. They are a warning, a reminder that the structures we build, the empires of glass and steel, are nothing if they are built upon a foundation of forgotten sorrow and unaddressed injustice. The chill you feel in a cold spot is not just a drop in temperature, it is the touch of a memory. The sound you hear in the silence is not just the building settling, it is a voice trying to speak its name. This is the covenant of such places. They demand to be witnessed. So when you next walk into such a grand and overwhelming place, allow yourself a moment of true sight. Look past the bright displays and the smiling salespeople. Try to feel the history of the ground you stand on. Listen, not with your ears, but with your soul, for the whispers that ride the currents of the air conditioning. See the reflections in the glass, not as a mirror of yourself, but as a possible doorway to somewhere else. Acknowledge the unseen, because in doing so you are paying a tribute. You are telling the forgotten that they are not forgotten, and perhaps, in that small act of recognition, you can bring a moment of peace to the souls who are forever shopping. The great machine of consumerism will churn on, its gears greased with our desires. New stories will be written in the dust of the stockrooms and the smudges on the dressing room mirrors. New employees will arrive, bright-eyed and unaware, and they too will learn the store's secret language of fear. The child will continue to play, the bride will continue to weep, and Thomas, the ghost in the machine, will continue his watch. his fractured spirit a permanent part of the inventory. The store is more than a store. It is a living, breathing entity with a heart that beats in the silent rhythm of a lonely elevator and a soul that sighs with the scent of a forgotten perfume. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? We have walked the haunted aisles together, peered into the shadowed corners, and listened to the whispers of those left behind. The line between the world of the living and the world of memory is thinner than you think, and sometimes it is as thin as a pane of display glass. These stories are not meant to simply scare you. They are meant to awaken you to the reality that the past is never truly past. It lives alongside us, in the places we build, in the objects we cherish, in the very air we breathe. The world is far more haunted than we dare to admit, not by monsters, but by memories, by sorrows that were never given a voice. Until the next whisper finds you, walk with awareness. Question the silence. Honor the history that lies buried just beneath your feet. For we are all, in our own way, custodians of the stories that came before us. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Carry this knowledge with you. Let it be a lantern in the darker corners of your own world. The echoes are everywhere, waiting for someone to finally listen. They are waiting for you, and now you know how to hear them. The doors are closing now, the lights are dimming, but the stories are only just beginning.